Listen, the wind is still, the dogs are restless, your cattle are uneasy. If you don't check now, it might be too late. On a cold, silent morning, a rancher found one of his cows lying alone in the back field. At first glance, it seemed routine, but the absence of tracks, disturbed soil, or nervous herd told another story. The air was heavy, the silence hollow, and a faint metallic smell lingered. At a glance, the cow appears mostly intact. No huge chunks are missing, no shredded flesh, no signs of a predator. But the head tells a different story. The jawline stripped of flesh in a neat, curved band, one eye socket perfectly empty, the ear gone as if removed with a single, precise motion. The openings are smooth, almost polished. He searches for blood. A cow carries gallons of it. Predators kill messily. Bullets or gut wounds leave puddles. Here there is none. No stains, no seepage, the hide dry, the exposed tissue strangely bloodless, emptied rather than opened. A veterinarian arrives. He has seen coyotes tear livestock, diseased waste animals, and bodies left in the sun. This is different. The cuts are smooth, the work of an instrument or an intelligence beyond human skill. Certain organs are gone, removed rather than torn. Capillaries look drained. Fractures in the legs and ribs suggest impact injuries, not simple collapse. And yet, the ground is flat. No sign of struggle, no evidence that anything could have moved the animal. If it was moved, how? A cow doesn't float, it doesn't teleport. And still, the body, the wounds, the empty space whisper the same impossible suggestion. It was taken, worked on, and returned, altered by some unseen hand. Word spreads quickly in the rural community. Another dead cow might have been ignored, but this one is different. The sheriff's department sends a deputy, the vet files his report, and soon an independent investigator arrives, someone who has spent years chasing patterns most would rather ignore. He has seen this scene before, bloodless carcasses, surgical cuts, empty ground. He isn't here to dismiss it. The three men walk the field. The deputy searches for human evidence, cigarette butts, footprints, tire tracks. He finds nothing. The vet looks for natural causes, disease, injury, and predators. The body yields no answers. The investigator searches for repetition, signature, the invisible fingerprints of an intelligence that leaves no trace. He asks questions that make the others uneasy. Strange lights in the sky, humming noises at night, animals acting strangely, stories emerge. The rancher admits the dogs were restless the night before, pacing and whining for no reason. A neighbor says she awoke at 2 a.m. to a soft white glow in her bedroom. Pulling back the curtain, she saw a round, silent light hovering over the fields. After a minute, it dimmed and vanished. Predators leave ragged wounds and tracks, not surgical precision or total bloodlessness. Humans, even the most careful, leave evidence, footprints, tire marks, but none exist here. This case matches others in different counties, states, and years. To blame humans requires believing in a secret operation with perfect stealth, advanced tools, and no explainable motive. Natural explanations fail. Fractures suggest a fall. Blood is completely absent, even when soil is tested. Certain organs are consistently missing and cuts are precise. Ranchers swear the animals were healthy hours before. Each normal explanation covers only one detail and collapses against the others. As night falls, the three men sense the same invisible wall. Something happened here that defies conventional reasoning. No tracks, no blood, only fleeting lights and eerie stillness, an intelligence acting with precision and disappearing without a trace. The investigator notes anomalies, flattened grass, disturbed soil, and quiet that feels alive. The event seems sudden, surgical, and observed from afar. The pattern repeats across time and distance, consistent and deliberate. It points not to nature, not to humans, but to something else entirely, something precise, deliberate, untraceable. By the night's end, reports are filed, notes added, but the mystery remains. The signature of the act, the precision, the lack of evidence, the recurring pattern, resists explanation. Only one conclusion seems to fit. An intelligence moves silently, strikes surgically, and vanishes, leaving the impossible for the world to puzzle over. At some point, usually when the recorder is off or the camera isn't rolling, someone finally says what nobody wants to admit. What if the animal wasn't killed here at all? What if it was taken? The idea feels absurd, especially in daylight, in front of adults with jobs and reputations. Yet the facts line up: broken bones like a fall, a bloodless body, surgical cuts, untouched ground. It makes the most physical sense, even if the least emotional sense. In the deep hours of the night, a silent light descends over the field. The cow is lifted, not dragged into the air. No marks, no struggle, no tracks. It is brought inside something, call it a craft, a machine, a lab, that doesn't care about our words for it. Inside, there is no ritual, no candles, no chants. There is a procedure, bright, harsh light, smooth, cold surfaces, instruments that cut tissue without tearing, remove organs without splashing, and extract blood completely. The animal is not a victim in a horror story. It is a specimen, a data point, a sample. When the procedure is finished, the body is returned, not placed gently, but dropped from a height, enough to fracture bones, not enough to scatter the carcass. Whatever life remained, if any, is gone. By sunrise, all that's left is a circle of untouched earth with a dead, altered animal at its center. The only signs of anything unnatural are the body itself and the rare stories of people who admit seeing something strange in the sky. If this had happened once, it could be dismissed as an anomaly, but it hasn't. Investigators who track these cases maintain maps most people never see, pinboards and databases filled with mutilations from ranches across the country and beyond. Different owners, breeds, and landscapes, yet the same story. Bloodless carcasses, precise cuts, missing eyes and organs, no tracks. Years apart, states apart, yet eerily alike. The pattern doesn't look random, it looks systematic, like a program running quietly in the background of rural life, ignored by those unwilling to consider that the operating system might not be entirely human. Eventually, the mutilated cow is hauled away. The rancher still has to feed the rest of his herd. Bills still come. The world doesn't stop just because something impossible happened in a field. The sheriff files it as unexplained. The vet hides behind careful wording. The investigator adds one more pin to his map and drives off, knowing this exact scene has played out before, in another county, another year. Officially, nothing has been proven. Unofficially, nothing has been disproven either. But for the people who stood over that body, it never really ends. The rancher can't walk that patch of ground without seeing the clean circle of dirt and that empty socket where an eye should be. The neighbor who saw the hovering light now double-checks the sky before she closes her curtains. The investigator stares at his map at night and realizes the pattern doesn't look random anymore. Do you watch your herd closely at night? Comment below if you've ever seen something unexplainable. In the shadowy depths of the Texas Panhandle, where the wind whispers secrets through endless fields of dry grass, a chilling rumor has haunted the locals for years. It speaks of a young woman, vibrant and full of life, who vanished one fateful evening while jogging down a desolate country road under a starlit sky. Witnesses claim she was pursued by an unidentified object, a glowing orb that descended from the heavens, pulsing with an otherworldly light that silenced the night. As the rumor spreads like wildfire through small-town diners and whispered conversations, some say she was snatched away in a beam of blinding radiance, her screams echoing into oblivion. But what if the truth is darker, a cosmic abduction that defies explanation, leaving only questions and fear in its wake? This is the story of a young girl disappear in a shining light from the sky, and only one person knows what actually happened. In 2007, Emily relocated to a quiet rural community in the Texas Panhandle alongside her former partner and his relatives. With no family of her own in the area and few acquaintances beyond his circle, she felt isolated at first. That changed when she struck up a conversation with her neighbor, Sophia, a woman roughly her age who shared similar interests, including fitness and motherhood, as Sophia had a young son. The two women bonded swiftly, forming a close friendship. Sophia, a slender and energetic Latina with a passion for jogging and workouts, maintained a strict daily routine. She would lace up her shoes and head out for a run along the deserted old country road at precisely 6 p.m., returning home by 7 p.m. without fail. The road was typically serene, with minimal traffic, making it an ideal path for her evening exercise. About 6 months after Emily's arrival, around March 2008, Sophia started mentioning peculiar lights she had spotted in a patch of woods opposite their homes. For over a week, she claimed, these lights would materialize one after another during her runs, hovering motionless before gradually dimming and vanishing into the night. Intrigued by the story, Emily, who had a keen interest in the supernatural and spent her free time delving into paranormal research, offered to join Sophia on her next outing to witness the phenomenon firsthand. However, just as they prepared to leave, Emily received an urgent call from her boyfriend about a car breakdown on a distant road, forcing her to rush off and assist him. She apologized to Sophia, promising to accompany her another time, and left in haste. Sophia proceeded with her run alone, undeterred. Emily returned home after roughly an hour, only to find Sophia sitting on her porch, her usually olive-toned skin drained of color, appearing ghostly pale. Concerned, Emily hurried over and inquired what had happened. Sophia, still shaken, whispered that one of them had pursued her, a UFO from the cluster of lights. Emily sat beside her as Sophia recounted the terrifying ordeal. Midway through her jog, the lights had reappeared as usual. Eager to capture evidence for Emily, Sophia pulled out her fully charged phone and snapped a few photos. But inexplicably, the device shut down after 3 shots, leaving her frustrated. When she glanced back, the lights had drawn nearer, no longer stationary. Panicking, she turned to sprint home, but one orb detached from the group and veered toward her. Sophia dove into a nearby thicket of overgrown shrubs for cover, her heart pounding as the light passed overhead and then faded away. She bolted back to her house, vowing to avoid the road for a while. For nearly a month, Sophia steered clear of her runs, haunted by the memory. Eventually, she convinced herself it was an overreaction, perhaps just distant aircraft or a trick of the eye, and resolved to resume her routine. She invited Emily to join her for safety, but Emily declined, citing fatigue from a long day. In hindsight, Emily often reflected on how fortunate that decision might have been. Sophia waved goodbye, assuring Emily she'd return shortly. Mere minutes after Sophia departed, Emily noticed brilliant flashes streaking past her window, illuminating the drawn curtains. Assuming it was Sophia's sister arriving early for a planned shopping trip, Emily dismissed it and continued her evening. 20 minutes later, Emily stepped outside for a quick break, lighting a cigarette under the starry sky. That's when she saw them, 3 luminous orbs hovering low over the field directly across from her house. They bobbed gently near the ground, emitting a soft glow that captivated her. Excited, Emily thought of sharing the sighting with Sophia upon her return. The lights lingered for what felt like an eternity, perhaps 45 minutes, before suddenly rocketing upward and dissolving into the darkness. Coincidentally, at that exact moment, Sophia's sister pulled into the driveway. She knocked on Sophia's door, but there was no response. Venturing inside to check, she found the house empty. Emerging puzzled, she confided in Emily, who suggested Sophia might still be out jogging and would appear soon. They waited together, chatting idly at first, but as minutes stretched into hours, worry set in. Sophia never returned. Hours morphed into days, days into weeks, and weeks into months, with no trace of her. Despite exhaustive searches involving local authorities, volunteers, and even aerial surveys of the surrounding woods and fields, Sophia remained missing. The community buzzed with theories. Some whispered of foul play by a stranger passing through the sparse traffic. Others speculated about an accident in the underbrush, but no evidence surfaced. Emily, tormented by guilt for not accompanying her friend, replayed the events endlessly in her mind. She couldn't shake the connection to those eerie lights, especially after Sophia's earlier encounter. The orbs Emily had witnessed that fateful night seemed too coincidental, too ominous. Years later, Emily still pondered Sophia's fate, wondering if the lights were linked to her disappearance. Perhaps they were extraterrestrial probes, as some paranormal enthusiasts suggested, or advanced drones from a nearby military base. Rumors of secret testing in the Panhandle circulated among locals. Sophia's fear during her initial sighting now haunted Emily, prompting her to question if her vibrant friend had been abducted, harmed, or simply vanished into thin air like so many unsolved cases. The phone photos Sophia attempted were lost with her dead device, leaving no proof. Emily shared the story anonymously in online forums, hoping for closure, but it only amplified her unease. To this day, Sophia's name lingers on missing persons lists, a stark reminder of that quiet Texas road and the mysteries it holds. Reflecting on the broader implications, Emily considered how such incidents might tie into larger patterns of unexplained phenomena reported across rural America. She delved deeper into research, uncovering similar accounts of glowing orbs pursuing joggers or hikers in isolated areas, some ending in vanishings without resolution. In one altered recollection, Emily imagined Sophia's son growing up without answers, fueling her resolve to advocate for better search protocols in remote towns. The friendship they shared, built on shared laughs and evening chats, now served as a bittersweet memory. Emily moved away eventually, but the Panhandle's vast skies still evoked chills whenever she visited. The lights, whatever their origin, had forever altered her perception of the ordinary, turning a simple run into an enigma that echoed through time. The blast did not sound like an explosion. It looked like one. A vertical spear of electric blue punched upward from Tango 7 and turned the snowfield into daylight for a single breath. Calvin Rhodes was already running, Brooke Anders close behind, boots biting into hard drifts as the air burned cold in their lungs. When the light collapsed, the station was gone. Not broken, not burning, not scattered into debris. The antenna mast, the wind wall, the weather dome, the fuel drums, the whole footprint of human shelter simply did not exist anymore. There was only perfectly smooth snow, unmarked and untouched, as if Tango 7 had never been built. The horizon returned to darkness, and something tall remained out there watching, too many silhouettes to count before the night swallowed them again. Calvin had worked Arctic rotations long enough to believe he understood isolation. 6 years at northern research posts teaches you what darkness does to time and nerves. 3 weeks into the deep winter shift, he and Brooke were the only two people at Tango 7, 70 miles north of the Arctic Circle, surrounded by permanent night and temperatures that hovered around -38. He had heard older crews talk about strange lights and missing hours, the kind of stories that never survived paperwork. It was not that he had never considered the possibility. It was that he refused to believe it could be real until it reached down and shut the world off around him. Midwinter at Tango 7 meant permanent night and air cold enough to sting the lungs on every breath. Calvin Rhodes was checking the magnetometer along the eastern instrument belt when the horizon changed shape. A thin, pale yellow band appeared perfectly horizontal across the east, too straight to be aurora, too steady to be weather. It did not ripple, it did not drift. It held like a line drawn with a blade. Then a second detail surfaced above it, a dark craft shape hanging in the sky, wide and silent, with no blinking markers and no engine noise. Its underside looked smooth and featureless, except for 3 faint points of light spaced with geometric intent, dim enough to feel deliberate. The station radio died into absolute silence. Not static, not fade, just nothing, as if every frequency had been shut off at the source. Inside the station, digital displays began to blink and drop, batteries collapsing from full to empty in minutes. Outside devices refused to stay on long enough to record a frame. On a perimeter camera feed, the snowfield near the north berm briefly showed a tall figure standing upright, far too slender to be a bear, too still to be a person in wind. It was roughly 20 feet from the fence line, and it pulsed in sync with the yellow band, like the light was controlling both the sky and what stood beneath it. The feed darkened and vanished. When the systems returned hours later, the band and the craft were gone, leaving only the normal Arctic horizon. But Calvin could not shake the memory of that silent object above the line, and the impossible certainty that something had been close enough to look back before the station went blind. They did not report the light or the vertical shape. Without footage, it would become a story, and stories in a government chain become assessments, evaluations, and quiet removals. They wrote only what could be described as technical anomalies and tried to return to routine, but the station felt altered, as if the walls had become thin. During a final perimeter check, Calvin saw the snow outside the wind wall and froze. The ground held prints that were not prints. Perfect circles were pressed into the snow, each nearly 4 feet wide. They were spaced apart with no trail between them, no scuff marks, no stride marks, nothing to explain travel. The circles formed a pattern that began north of the station and curved around it in a tightening spiral. Inside each circle, the snow looked polished, smooth, not compressed, not melted, as if the surface had been finished rather than stepped on. A thermal scan showed the circles were warm, not slightly warm. Warm enough to stand out like fresh metal in cold air, around 40 degrees, more than 60 degrees above ambient. There was no residual radiation and no heat source below, just warmth held in perfect geometry, a signature left behind. 3 nights later, the phenomenon returned, different but more aggressive. A deep electric blue band appeared not on the horizon but higher in the sky, angled 30 degrees, stretching north to south. It began descending. The station power failed completely. Emergency systems stayed dark. Inside, temperature climbed rapidly, heat bleeding in as if something outside was radiating into the building. Through a window, Calvin saw the blue band hovering 10 feet above the snow, tall and narrow, impossibly thin yet brighter than any flare. From that light, a tall blurred form began to emerge, not walking in, but pressing through as if the air had turned into a membrane. They fled west into open snow. Behind them, Tango 7 erupted into a column of blue light that punched upward and lit the world so hard it threw sharp shadows across the tundra. In that glare, the snowfield was crowded with motionless figures, dozens, then hundreds, tall shapes spaced out as if arranged, all facing the same direction. Then the light cut off. Where the station had stood, there was nothing. No wreckage, no crater, no scattered panels, only untouched snow, smooth as a blank page. 6 months later, Calvin and Brooke returned north, 50 miles from where Tango 7 had been erased. The tundra greeted them with geometry. Circular impressions, nearly 4 feet wide, sat in ordered patterns instead of trails. Every circle held warmth through gloves, heat sealed into the snow without meltwater. From higher ground, the layout resembled a coastline map stamped into the ice. At 3:47 a.m., all electronics died at once. Cameras went black. Satellites dropped. Screens blanked. The air thickened, and a slow vibration rose through the ground, deep and rhythmic, like a massive engine idling beneath the world. Frost crept higher along fabric seams, not from wind, but from cold that felt switched on around them. Then the gold band appeared, perfectly horizontal, suspended over the tundra like a ruler line drawn across reality. Above it, a UFO resolved out of darkness, massive and silent, swallowing starlight. Its underside was smooth and curved, with recessed points of faint light arranged in precise geometry, matching the warm circles below. A thin vertical beam dropped from the craft to the band and down to the ground, clean and pale, outlining a corridor rather than lighting it. Inside the beam, the darkness looked dense, almost glassy. Snow beneath it did not stir. Along that beam, alien figures emerged, tall and narrow, long-limbed, their edges wavering as if they were not fully solid. They did not crunch through snow and left no footprints. They appeared in positions as if placed, facing Calvin's line of sight, spaced with measured intent. Some turned their heads in smooth arcs without shifting their bodies. Their surfaces were matte and dark, with faint pulses moving beneath them like light under skin, matching the vibration in the ground. The UFO lowered slightly. The beam brightened once. The warmth inside the circles intensified, and the snow within each ring looked subtly polished, as if its surface had been restructured. One figure occupied a nearer position, close enough for shallow facial contours to be visible, eyes that did not shine yet held attention like a sensor. Meaning pressed into Calvin's mind without sound, a demand shaped like a question, followed by an answer delivered as images. Tango 7 had not been destroyed. It had been removed, pulled out of a place it did not belong, a human structure interfering with layers of reality it was never meant to occupy. Calvin stopped thinking of the Arctic as empty. He began thinking of it as occupied. The lights were not a mystery flare in the distance. The prints were not a prank. The station was not destroyed. It was erased. If you ever work under permanent night and you see a perfectly horizontal band that does not ripple, or you find warm circles pressed into snow with no trail between them, do not assume you are alone. Assume you are standing near the spaces between, and that something tall is already facing your direction, waiting to see if you look back. Night in the Rockies. The cab is the only warm box of light for miles. Jackson grips the wheel as the road ahead looks edited, like someone erased the depth from the world and left only a flat strip of asphalt in its place. The beams from his truck still blaze, yet they stop short in midair, as if the darkness has weight. Then a pressure settles over the roof. Not wind, not weather, something vast and deliberate. The engine sound thins into a hollow hum, every gauge steady but meaningless, and the air inside the cab turns metallic and sharp. Jackson lifts his eyes to the windshield and realizes he is not approaching the anomaly. It is approaching him. October 2019, Colorado. The stretch from Grand Junction toward Gunnison is the kind of road that feels empty even when you are not alone. Just black mountains, cold air, and the hum of a diesel engine trying to keep you anchored to reality. Jackson had 15 years behind the wheel. He knew the difference between fear and imagination. That night, the road taught him a third thing. The line ran parallel to the highway, bright but sourceless, not blinking like aircraft lights, not shimmering like reflection, just a clean glowing stroke suspended in open air. Jackson slowed. Mary leaned forward, trying to make sense of it, trying to film it. The phone struggled to lock focus, hunting the darkness, refusing the line like it did not want to be recorded. Then the headlights failed in the strangest way. The bulbs still burned. The dashboard still glowed, but the beam would not reach the road. It stacked up in front of the grill, flat and useless, as if the night had turned solid. The truck shuddered and died. A hard cut of silence. No wind through mirrors, no engine vibration, just their breathing. Seconds later, everything returned at once. Engine, radio, normal light. Jackson drove on, trying to laugh it off. 10 minutes later, Mary checked the GPS. Same coordinates, same mile marker, same distance to Gunnison, still locked at 38 to 40 miles like the road had reset. They passed signs they had already passed. They saw a reflector that felt familiar, then impossible. Jackson kept driving anyway, because stopping made it feel worse. The line returned. This time it did not float beside the road. It stretched across the highway ahead, widening into a pale tear in the dark. The air around it looked wrong, like heat shimmer without heat. Jackson did the only thing his instincts could agree on. He put his foot down and drove straight through. The moment the truck crossed the seam, the pressure in their ears released. The GPS jumped forward. The next sign finally changed. The road began behaving like a road again. 3 months later, Jackson had to take Highway 50 again, daylight this time, alone. He told himself daylight meant safety. It did not. Midway through the run, he saw a woman in a white dress standing on the shoulder. No coat, no bag, no car nearby. Just her, perfectly still as if placed there. As he approached, the details broke. Her eyes sat too far apart. Her mouth looked too wide. Her skin had the waxy calm of a store mannequin trying to imitate a human being. Jackson stared, caught between braking and fleeing. The truck passed her, and she turned to follow him. Not like a person, like a display on a rotating stand. A smooth mechanical pivot that kept her face tracking the cab until Jackson could no longer see her in the mirror. Then Jackson felt it, that prickling certainty you get when you are being measured. Not watched casually, watched with purpose. A thought slid in, quiet and cold, not in words, but in meaning. We know you. Jackson told himself it was just a weird roadside moment. Then his CB radio hissed, one thin line of static, clean and steady, like a tone. No voice, no chatter, just a single frequency that didn't belong. A mile later, the world started to thin out. Not visually. Colorado still looked like Colorado, but sound became too clean. The tire noise dulled, like someone lowered the volume on the universe. Even the vibration through the wheel felt filtered. Jackson glanced at the clock. The digits looked normal, but the seconds didn't tick. So much as hold, like time was deciding whether to move. Then his headlights did something impossible in broad daylight. They were on, bright, normal, and yet the beam hit the air ahead and stopped, flattened against an invisible surface just beyond the hood, as if the light couldn't move forward. Jackson whispered, no. He eased off the gas, instinct, then tried to correct back into the lane. The steering didn't resist, it wasn't stiff. It felt like the road had become a track and the truck was no longer his. And then the engine shut down, not a cough, not a sputter, a clean surgical cut. RPM dropped to 0, the hum vanished. The cab became a sealed box of silence. He coasted to the shoulder, hands shaking, trying the ignition. Nothing. The dash stayed lit, but the lights looked wrong, too steady, too perfect, like a screenshot of a dashboard rather than a living system. Jackson looked down at his phone on the seat. The screen was awake. One word sat there as if it had always been waiting. Stay. He didn't remember unlocking it. He didn't remember anyone typing it. And then he saw the shadow. It wasn't cast by clouds. It didn't match the sun's angle. It slid over the road in a shape that shouldn't exist. A triangle, wide enough to swallow his rig. Jackson forced himself to look up. A black triangular craft hung above Highway 50, low, silent, with 3 faint points of light at its corners. No seams, no detail. It didn't reflect sunlight so much as refuse it. The air changed, cold pressure behind the eyes, a metallic bite like ozone. From the center underside, something unfolded. Not a spotlight, but a hard-edged column of pale light, as straight as a doorway drawn into the air. Dust stopped drifting, and inside that column a figure resolved, tall, thin, with limbs that bent the wrong way, joints stacked where joints shouldn't be. It didn't walk down. It simply became present on the asphalt as if distance had been folded. Jackson's throat locked. He couldn't scream. Then the contact arrived, not through sound, but straight into his head, sharp and emotionless. Seen. A second pulse followed. Images that weren't his choice. The white hovering line from months ago, the GPS loop, the moment reality tore across the road. And then, the woman in the white dress, now not standing at the shoulder but standing inside his memory like a bookmark. The same wrong face, the same fixed attention. Another thought pressed in, colder. Watcher, lure, alignment confirmed. The figure lifted a long hand and touched the truck's window. The fingers were too long, too many bends. The gesture wasn't threatening, it was testing, like learning what glass is. Jackson tried to move, his body didn't respond. Not paralysis, something worse. Like his impulse had nowhere to go. Then the final thought landed, heavy as a verdict. Marked, continued. Sound snapped back, wind, distant traffic. The creak of the cab, the column of light was gone. The triangle was gone. The phone screen returned to normal like it had never shown anything. The engine restarted by itself. Jackson sat there breathing hard, staring at empty sky, knowing the scariest part wasn't the shutdown. It was how precisely it had all been timed. As if the roadside woman wasn't random, she was a trigger, a sign that the next stage had begun. That night he checked his dashcam. The file list jumped from 2:13 p.m. to 2:29 p.m., 16 minutes missing. The gap wasn't a corrupted file. It was cleanly removed, as if somebody had highlighted a strip of time and cut it out. 2 days later, a plain envelope appeared in his mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Inside, a single photo taken from high above Highway 50 in daylight, his rig on the shoulder, and above it, unmistakable, the black triangle hanging perfectly centered. At the bottom, one line, "You were seen." And Jackson finally understood what the woman's stare had been. Not curiosity, not warning, a handoff. Jackson says the worst part wasn't the craft. It was the feeling that Highway 50 had turned into a checkpoint and he'd been processed. Because you can explain a blackout, you can explain a GPS loop, but you can't explain a photo taken from above your truck when you never saw anything up there. So tell me, if it happened to you, would you keep driving or would you vanish first? Clint kills the tractor lights and the field disappears. Just a black ocean of stubble and wind. Then the radio screams and cuts dead, and something presses on his chest like the sky just got heavier. A pale ring floats ahead, too clean, too round, hanging 20 stories above his land like it's measuring the place. The tractor keeps running until it doesn't. Not a stall, not a sputter, just silence, like a switch flipped on the whole world. Clint Hargrove has worked the same 480 acres his grandfather broke in back in 1947. After harvest, the nights get wide and empty, and you start hearing your own thoughts over the engine. He never believed in signs. But that October, the land began answering back, through the radio, through the air, through the dirt itself, like something overhead had decided the field was a page worth reading. Second week of October 2021, after harvest. Clint Hargrove is easing his tractor toward the shed when the radio warps into a hard metallic hiss. At the same instant, a strange pressure clamps his chest, like the air itself is charged. Out over the cut rows, a pale circular object hangs about 200 feet up. Smooth, perfectly round, glowing white without a beam. The wind dies. The field feels muted, like sound has been turned down. Clint tries the ignition. Nothing. No click, no cough. The dash goes dead, as if the machine has been unplugged from the world. The object descends, straight down, until it's hovering 10 feet above the soil. Beneath it, the ground shifts to a rusty orange and shimmers with heat. Vapor rising, no flames, just an ozone tang. The glow parts and 3 small figures step out, around 4.5 feet tall, thin, long-armed, with oversized smooth heads and no clear facial features from where he's frozen in the cab. They pause in a neat line, motionless, like they're waiting for a reading to finish. One of them turns its head slightly. Clint feels instantly noticed. A single harsh crackle snaps from the radio, though it's switched off. Then the light cuts out. The figures vanish. The disc is gone. Darkness returns to normal, and without him touching the key, the tractor starts itself. Headlights flaring back on, the radio resuming mid-song, like the night never skipped a beat. At sunrise, Clint finds the spot fast because it isn't burned. It's too clean. A 30-foot circle of soil has turned black and slick, faintly reflective like glass. No ash, no smoke, just a thin ozone bite that shouldn't still be there. He takes photos. Every shot looks fine until he zooms. The edge of the ring won't stay sharp, like the camera can't agree on what it's seeing. He jars a sample and shows it to Dr. Ellen Moss. She studies it, then goes quiet. Extreme heat. Hot enough to fuse silica, and it cooled fast. Clint asks, "Lightning?" Ellen shakes her head. "Lightning isn't this even. It doesn't make a perfect ring." That night he returns alone. The circle looks darker than the surrounding field, like it's swallowing starlight. When he steps near the edge, the insects don't quiet naturally. They cut off too suddenly, like sound hit an invisible boundary. Then the pressure comes back in his chest. Over the ring, a pale curve appears for a blink, like the rim of something huge sliding through air that isn't air. Clint backs away slow, eyes locked on that black circle, certain of one thing: whatever made it plans to come back. That night, the circle turns into a silence trap. Crickets don't fade, they cut out the instant he steps over an invisible threshold. Wind still moves the tree line, but not the air above the ring. His own breathing feels too loud, too close, like the sound is trapped in his ribcage. He tells himself it's nerves, a trick of attention, so he tries to leave proof. He scoops soil into labeled jars, seals the lids tight, and locks them in the barn. He scribbles the date and time on masking tape, presses it down hard. In the morning, the lids are loosened, not all of them, just 2, and one label is smeared as if a damp thumb dragged across the ink. Clint stands there staring at the jars, feeling the same pressure he felt in the field, except now it's inside his house. That's when he stops using his phone. He digs out an old mini DV camcorder, the kind that doesn't need a signal, the kind nobody can remote into. He charges the battery, checks the tape, and tells himself he'll do one clean recording and be done. He goes out after midnight. He parks with headlights facing away, keeps the truck door open like an escape hatch, and walks in slow, deliberate steps, camcorder tucked tight against his chest. At the ring's edge, his chest pressure returns. Sharp, electrical, like standing too close to a transformer. He steps over the boundary, and the world drops out. No insects, no wind, no far-off highway hum. Just a vacuum of sound so complete his ears start to ring from the absence. He raises the camcorder. Through the viewfinder, the field looks slightly flattened. Depth feels off, like the circle is a thin overlay placed on top of the land. Then his truck radio starts tearing with static, loud enough to hear from the field. Above the ring, the starlight seems to thin, like something is hanging there that the sky refuses to outline. A pale object sits low, and the weirdest part is the light. It doesn't throw shadows outward. Shadows seem to lean toward it, as if the rules are reversed. Then 3 small figures appear beneath it, not walking in, just there, placed on the ground. Thin bodies, long arms, smooth round heads, no clear features from Clint's distance. They don't look at him. They spread out with perfect spacing and press their hands to the soil along the ring. Tap, faint glow, gone. Tap, faint glow, gone, like they're checking a circuit. And then Clint notices something else through the lens. Faint straight lines, barely visible, crossing the field beyond the circle. A grid, subtle as a watermark. The ring is just one node in it. His mouth goes dry. His hands tighten on the camcorder. A stalk snaps under his boot. All three figures stop at once and pivot toward him with the same smooth, mechanical precision. Clint tries to lift his flashlight, clicks it on, and the beam dies clean at the ring's edge, as if light itself can't cross. The pressure in his chest climbs into his skull. He feels something brush the inside of his thoughts. Not words, not a voice, just a cold sense of being indexed. Like his name has been copied into a ledger he'll never see. One figure takes a slow step toward him. Clint tries to back up and realizes his feet are moving a half beat late, like his body is lagging behind his decision. He stumbles, catches himself, and the camcorder tilts, just enough to catch the underside of the object. The light shifts. For a split second, the smooth surface isn't smooth at all. It's segmented, panel lines that don't meet at right angles, patterns that refuse to settle in his eyes. Then everything ends at once. The object lifts, the figures vanish, crickets resume mid-song like someone hit play. Clint looks at his watch. The time is wrong, backward by minutes he can't account for. In the distance, his truck coughs like it's trying to start, then stops, repeating with the same timing like a recording being practiced. He runs, slams the door, starts the engine normally, and drives off, shaking so hard his teeth click. At sunrise, the circle is still there, unchanged, except for 3 shallow impressions just inside the boundary, evenly spaced like markers. He rewinds the tape. The footage is mostly normal. His boots, the ring, the sudden silence. But the moment the figures appear, the image degrades into a clean, deliberate blur, as if the camera is being told what it's allowed to keep. Except for one thing, a single frame where the grid lines are visible, unmistakable. Clint locks the tape in his fireproof safe, not because he's afraid people won't believe him, but because he's starting to believe the circle isn't just on his land anymore, it's on him. And once you're on the list, the sky doesn't need to come down again. It can just wait. Clint doesn't release the footage. He locks it away, because the ring doesn't care about proof. It keeps returning. Same pressure in his chest, same radio hiss, and new faint lines in the soil like a grid being rebuilt. Nothing attacks him. Nothing threatens him. It just checks, marks, and leaves. His last note is simple. One night at the ring's edge, the stars looked wrong. For a second, like the sky blinked. So if you found a perfect circle where the world goes quiet, would you step in? The desert highway looked unchanged in starlight, a thin ribbon of asphalt cutting through nothing. Evan Strickland stood beside his truck and watched 3 lights appear over the flats, one by one, perfectly spaced, the wrong color for any aircraft. They did not blink. They held position like marks on a grid. The lights began to orbit, not around each other, around Evan and Tessa Jordan. The air thickened. A hum formed behind Evan's eyes, then in his teeth, too clean to be wind. For a moment, his boots separated from the asphalt by a few inches, as if gravity had been negotiated away. Then everything snapped back. The lights were gone. The night looked normal. Evan checked his watch and felt his stomach drop. Time had moved backward. Nevada at night can make reality feel thin. Evan was 26 when it started, and he spent 11 years carrying the same unanswered gap. He was driving in a small military convoy on State Route 375 toward a classified site near Rachel. 5 vehicles, 12 personnel, routine on paper. The only reason he never wrote it off as his own mind was Tessa Jordan. She was there too, and years later she came back with the same nightmares and the same missing minutes. The first 2 hours were pure routine. No moon, stars dense enough to look textured, the road empty, the desert flat, the horizon erased. Then the radios failed. Not interference, not fading, a clean sudden silence that did not behave like terrain. Every channel died at once. The quiet felt engineered, like a hand placed over the spectrum. The convoy stopped in the same instant. Evan did not brake. The truck simply settled into a controlled halt. No brake lights ahead, no brake lights behind. 5 vehicles frozen in place. Evan looked up and saw a triangular absence sliding over the stars. Not a shadow, a shape that removed starlight. Massive, slow, silent, moving with purpose. Then the truck died completely. No dashboard glow, no engine vibration, no electronics like the world had been switched off around them. A thin beam dropped from the triangle. The color was wrong, pale with a faint blue edge that made the eyes ache. It swept the road slowly, left to right, revealing rocks and brush and cracked asphalt. But it cast no shadows. Objects looked flat, two-dimensional, like the ground had become a surface being read rather than lit. The beam stopped ahead of the convoy and held perfectly still. Evan could not measure time. His watch froze. With engines dead and radios silent, there was only breathing and the beam that behaved like something beyond physics. Then the beam retracted upward and the triangle rose, shrinking until the stars returned in their exact positions. Engines restarted on their own. Dashboards lit. Radios crackled alive. The convoy rolled forward again as if nothing had happened. At the checkpoint, Evan noticed the impossible detail. His watch was running again, but the time displayed was 13 minutes earlier than it should have been. Station clocks matched, logs matched. The timeline did not. The next morning, Evan found Tessa carrying the same hollow look. She had seen a detail he could not explain. The light behaved as if illumination and absence were separate things, moving independently. They searched for proof. Vehicle data should have shown a stop. GPS traces should have recorded a halt. Engine logs should have captured the shutdown. Instead, the records showed continuous forward motion from base to checkpoint, clean and uninterrupted, as if the convoy never paused at all. Tessa found something worse. The checkpoint perimeter cameras contained a missing block of footage exactly 13 minutes long, stamped with a generic electrical error code that did not fit the station's backup power. The gap matched the time distortion on Evan's watch with surgical precision. Evan tested the memory of others. A rear security driver who should have had the best view insisted the transport had been routine. No anomaly, no stop. The denial felt less like stubbornness and more like absence, the way starlight had been absent under the triangle. They chose silence. In their world, reporting the impossible did not trigger investigation, it triggered evaluation. The story moved into their bodies instead, becoming insomnia and fragments that arrived like broken footage, curved blue-lit walls, a smooth warm table surface that did not feel like metal, figures just outside focus, pressure in the skull that felt like questions without words. Evan left the military months later and tried to build a normal life. It cracked anyway. 10 years passed, then Tessa returned with the same nightmares and the same wrong math in the clock. Long dream hours collapsed into a few real minutes. Evan's fragments sharpened too, brief flashes of curved blue-lit walls and silhouettes that never held focus. They went back to Nevada anyway. At dusk, the desert looked harmless, almost empty on purpose. By full night, it became what Evan remembered, a place that feels like it is waiting. They parked on the shoulder near the stretch that felt right and stepped out into a silence so deep it made the blood in Evan's ears sound loud. The first light appeared above the flats, a steady point with that pale, wrong hue. A second arrived beside it, then a third, perfectly spaced. They did not blink like aircraft. They held position like markers, then began to move in a controlled orbit, circling Evan and Tessa as if measuring them. Above the road, a triangular absence slid into view and swallowed starlight. Not a shadow, not cloud, a clean geometric void that moved with intent. Under its centerline, a thin beam dropped, the same color Evan remembered from 2013, pale with a faint blue edge that hurt to stare at. The beam did not wash the desert with light. It carved a column of clarity through the darkness, and the ground inside it looked unnaturally flat, like texture without depth. The air thickened. A hum formed behind Evan's eyes, then in his teeth. Frost began to creep along the edges of Tessa's jacket despite the dry night, as if the temperature inside that corridor had been lowered independent of the world around it. Their truck died behind them without a sputter, lights off, engine silent, the dashboard blank in one clean cut. Inside the beam, figures resolved. Tall, narrow silhouettes standing where there should have been only empty desert. They did not walk in from the darkness. They appeared in positions, spaced with measured precision, facing the road as if it were a stage. Their limbs looked too long, their posture too still, and the edges of their bodies shimmered faintly as if they were not fully solid. When one of them turned its head, it did so without shifting weight, a smooth mechanical rotation that made Evan's stomach tighten. The beam held steady. The triangular void hovered low enough now that Evan could sense its scale, a silent mass pressing down on the night. The three orbiting lights tightened their circle, and Evan felt the moment his body stopped belonging to him. His boots separated from the asphalt by inches. Tessa rose beside him, rigid and weightless, her hair lifting as if underwater. The hum became a chord, layered and structured like a signal. Then everything snapped back. They dropped to the road. The beam retracted straight up, as if pulled by a reel. The void slid away, releasing the stars in perfect alignment. The truck's engine restarted on its own. Evan checked the time and felt his pulse spike. 13 minutes had inverted again, returned like a correction, as if the night had been edited and saved over. Tessa's face had changed. Not relief, recognition. A shock of memory trying to surface all at once, too large for language, leaving only tears and a tremor in her hands. Evan looked back to the desert where the figures had stood. The snowless ground was undisturbed, no footprints, no tracks, only a faint circular discoloration on the asphalt near where the beam had touched, as if heat had kissed the surface and left a subtle ring. Something had been there with them, not just lights in the sky, not just a craft, witnesses in the beam, watching closely enough to be seen, then choosing to vanish with the evidence. Route 375 doesn't feel like a random sighting. It feels like a repeatable method. Engines cut, radios muted, footage gapped, time bent, witnesses left arguing with their own clocks. If you've ever lost minutes on an empty road, if your electronics died all at once, if the sky looked like it removed the stars instead of covering them, tell me what happened. Patterns only surface when enough people compare the same impossible details. Drop your theories in the comments. Subscribe for more missing time cases and sightings that keep repeating where the desert is quiet enough to listen. Late Tuesday night in the West Texas oil fields, Dalton Ridgway pulled up to Pump 7, expecting nothing but the familiar chug of machinery and empty darkness. Then his electronics died, the air turned razor cold, and a perfect ring of blue-white lights appeared in total silence 50 feet away. 2 minutes later, it vanished, and Dalton realized he hadn't just seen something impossible, he had lost 9 minutes of his life. The story of Dalton Ridgway, a gritty, wary 42-year-old oil worker, unfolds in the deep, unyielding solitude of the West Texas oil fields. After 7 years navigating the endless black grid of Kalashi roads, Dalton was accustomed to the rhythmic, comforting chugging of the pump jacks. On a late Tuesday night, around 11:46 p.m., he arrived at Pump 7, killed his engine, and stepped into the profound, star-drenched darkness. That is when the anomaly appeared. 50 feet from the pump, suspended silently above a low, rusty metal giard, was a perfect ring of light. This was not scattered light. It was composed of 12 individual orbs of pale blue-white energy, arranged in a precise 20-foot diameter circle. They glowed with such controlled intensity that there was zero light spill, pure, contained energy that felt scientifically impossible. The physical effects were immediate and disorienting. A profound, unnatural cold enveloped him, sinking deeper than any West Texas winter. The air was thick with the sharp, acidic scent of ozone, the smell of a massive electrical discharge or superheated metal. Simultaneously, his electronics failed. His digital watch began to beep erratically, flashing meaningless sequences, and his phone, which moments before held a 60% charge, went completely dead. Dalton watched, frozen, as the 12 lights began a slow, synchronized, rhythmic rotation. After what Dalton estimated was just 2 minutes of paralyzed observation, the light vanished with a silent, absolute finality. When his colleague, Hector Moran, arrived at 11:56 p.m., Dalton was visibly shaken. The simple fact was undeniable. Despite his own internal clock and malfunctioning watch, which read 11:49 p.m., he had lost exactly 9 minutes of time. Furthermore, the rusty giard where the light had rested was now scorching hot to the touch, a sign of extreme, localized heat transfer. His supervisor dismissed it as St. Elmo's fire, but Dalton recognized the precision, the cold, and the blatant temporal distortion as evidence of a disciplined, purposeful presence. His exhaustion was instantly replaced by an unshakable obsession. He needed quantifiable proof. 3 weeks later, on another Tuesday night, Dalton was fully prepared. Alone at the remote Pump 12, his vehicle was outfitted with a charging pack for his phone, and his mind was tense with anticipation. At 1:09 a.m., the familiar, chilling cold descended, and the air crackled with a silent tension. This time, the formation was a perfect triangle of three larger, more intense blue-white lights, hovering 100 feet away. Shaking but steady, Dalton grabbed his phone and began to record, capturing 4 minutes and 17 seconds of the lights executing a complex, synchronized geometric pattern, a visual language. Suddenly, the triangle expanded, stretching its vertices outward to reveal the center, a massive, dark, physical craft. Its surface was non-reflective, appearing to absorb all ambient light, giving it a terrifying depth, like a perfect hole punched in the night sky. There were no visible rivets, seams, or conventional propulsion methods, a hallmark of true anomalous aerial vehicles, AAVs. As it descended slowly, a circular aperture opened in its underside, emitting a profound, visceral crimson light that pulsed, indicating a colossal, controlled energy source. Observing this light, Dalton experienced an acute cognitive jump, a jarring, instantaneous switch in consciousness. One moment, he was terrified and watching. The next, he was sitting back in his idling truck. The dash clock read 1:42 a.m. He had lost precisely 33 minutes of conscious awareness and memory. Scrambling out, he ran to the landing site. The metal giard was intensely hot. Below it, the ground was undeniable. The gravel had been swept away into a clean circle, and the soil beneath was vitrified, melted, fused, and cooled instantly into brittle, glassy earth, clear evidence of plasma weapon or extreme heat dissipation used by an advanced technology. Dalton resolved to keep the video a secret, acquiring the specialized EMF detector and high-end camera with Hector's help to prepare for the inevitable third act. 5 weeks after the second encounter, Dalton was back at Pump 7, his EMF detector placed strategically on his truck hood. It didn't beep, it began to scream, a loud, piercing, insistent alarm signaling the anomaly's return. Hundreds of individual blue-white lights appeared, arranging themselves in a breathtaking, ever-shifting fractal pattern, before finally coalescing into a single, complex object resembling a floating building of light and shadow. This ultimate structure was entirely non-Euclidean. Its angles and geometry appeared to shift based on Dalton's perspective, consistent with descriptions of high-level, possibly interdimensional, craft. At this moment, Dalton's sensory and cognitive perception shifted. The veil lifted. He saw beyond the light to the pure energy driving it, understanding the geometry of the universe. He felt like a colorblind man suddenly granted the full electromagnetic spectrum. A single, telepathic question imploded in his consciousness. Why do you observe? With his entire will, his soul's deepest impulse, Dalton responded, I want to understand. The vast floating structure dissolved, the hundreds of lights condensing rapidly into a single perfect sphere of light hovering barely 10 feet from his face. The sphere acted as a conduit, expanding his mind and filling it with compressed knowledge, a massive, silent download. He perceived the entities not as biological creatures, but as conscious energy patterns, geometric arrays of existence. They revealed themselves as the archivists, whose purpose was to meticulously record everything, every star, every atom, every thought, in a cosmic battle against entropy, the universe's eventual decay. They chose Dalton because his motivation was pure understanding, not fear or conquest. The lost time was not abduction. It was the duration required for the compressed data, an equivalent of years of research to be fully written onto his consciousness. The sphere vanished, leaving Dalton kneeling in the dirt, overwhelmed not by terror, but by the shattering, overwhelming beauty of the cosmic truth. The encounter fundamentally altered Dalton Ridgway. He kept the video footage, using it as his anchor to the truth. For a man who spent his life navigating the plains, trusting only his own reality was the foundation he had left. This quality qualified him for a truth the world would reject. 2 years later, he quit the oil fields, enrolled in community college to study physics, and eventually earned his doctorate. He became Dr. Dalton Ridgway, an astrophysicist who dedicated his life to anomalous observations and unexplained phenomena. He never spoke publicly about his nights in West Texas, but his academic career was built upon the knowledge he acquired. He published dense, technical papers on electromagnetic anomalies and complex geometric patterns, works that hinted at the profound truths he held without ever stating them outright. He established himself at the edges of the map, where accepted science broke down. And every few years, he would receive an email or a letter from someone else who had seen the lights, experienced lost time, or gained a strange, inexplicable certainty. Dr. Ridgway always responded, validating their experiences, knowing that the archivists were still out there, still recording. This is the heart of the story, the moment a simple oil worker stepped past the edge of normal reality and saw the mechanism behind it, the archivists quietly recording everything while the universe slowly decays. But here's what matters to us. If ordinary people like Dalton can be chosen, then what is it about your life, your attention, your curiosity, your need to understand that could make you a candidate too? And if any of this feels strangely familiar, don't scroll past. Drop a comment and keep it simple. Tell me where you are, what you experienced, whether your electronics failed like a battery drain or a signal drop, or your clock jumped, and what you felt in your body, cold, numbness, dizziness, ringing in your ears, anything. Every week I'm going to pick the most specific reports, compare the overlaps, and start building a real hotspot map from the patterns. If you want to be part of the group that tracks the real signs, hit subscribe. Don't just watch, document. From Argentina to New Mexico to Oregon, the mutilations spread with chilling consistency. Hollowed bodies, precise excisions, untouched landscapes. The same intelligence, the same precision, the same eerie signature appeared again and again. Something was studying Earth, and we could only wonder why. Reports of livestock mutilations have appeared across the globe, from Argentina to New Mexico. Animals found drained of blood, organs missing, and bodies untouched by scavengers. Each case shared the same eerie precision, leaving no explanation that fit earthly predators. In 2024, Oregon became the epicenter of this unexplained phenomenon. Ranchers discovered herds hollowed and dissected with perfect accuracy, pastures left undisturbed. Witnesses described glowing orange spheres rising silently from the ground, splitting in two, and vanishing within seconds. Shadowy forms were seen moving near the livestock, then disappearing as if the night itself swallowed them. The surge drew ufologists, scientists, and authorities, all captivated by a pattern too deliberate to ignore. Intelligence, stealth, and technology beyond human understanding were at work. The question remained, who or what was behind these operations, and why was Oregon the stage for this unfolding mystery? In the darkness, the creatures emerged, tall and spindly, their skin a pale, metallic gray that shimmered faintly under the moonlight. Oversized, amber-like eyes glowed with an unearthly intelligence, and their long, jointed limbs moved with a sinuous, almost liquid grace. They glided across the field silently, approaching the unsuspecting livestock with precision that defied natural explanation. Each animal froze, locked in place by an invisible field that rippled softly through the air, muscles rigid yet perfectly relaxed, eyes wide but calm. Not a single hoof shuffled, not a blade of grass bent under their passage. From their elongated arms, intricate tools extended, devices that seemed almost alive, capable of merging seamlessly with the veins and arteries of the immobilized animals. The blood was drawn methodically, siphoned from the body with a precision that left not a trace. No ruptured vessels, no coagulated residue, not even a single stray cell. The creatures worked quickly and silently, harvesting the life force with a mechanical rhythm, as though each extraction followed a pre-programmed protocol. Surrounding tissues remained untouched, organs unscathed, the animals' forms eerily intact, apart from the emptiness within. Once the harvest was complete, the instruments retracted as effortlessly as they appeared. The creatures lingered for a moment, surveying the still, silent field, then melted back into the shadows, their elongated forms vanishing between the hills. The livestock lay exactly where they had been taken, hollowed and unspoiled, an uncanny testament to the precision of the operation. The fields were left in perfect calm, devoid of footprints or drag marks, as if the event had been nothing more than a whisper in the night. Silence and emptiness remained, the only evidence of beings whose technology and intent far exceeded anything of this world. The creatures crouched beside their victims, their elongated limbs bending in impossible angles. Pale gray skin stretched taut over thin, sinewy bodies, while their large amber eyes scanned the animal with clinical focus. One limb extended, revealing a tool that gleamed faintly, almost organic in design. It pressed gently against the surface of the skin, peeling it back like the cover of a book, exposing the soft tissue beneath. Their selections were meticulous. Eyes, ears, lips, and tongue were removed with an eerie consistency, every cut clean and precise, as if guided by an invisible map. Reproductive organs disappeared entirely, excised without damaging surrounding tissues. The process suggested purpose beyond simple predation, biological sampling perhaps for genetic study, or examination of reproductive and soft tissue structures unknown to human science. Each movement was deliberate, economical, and silent. The animals remained immobilized, their bodies perfectly still as the aliens harvested what they needed. The most disturbing aspect was the drilling and suction method. A tiny circular opening appeared in the upper jaw, extending directly into the brain and ocular cavity. The creature's instruments drew the tissues through with impossibly delicate precision. The eyes and brain matter vanished into a slender tube that seemed to absorb without tearing. Surrounding structures were untouched. The technique implied a level of bioengineering and tool design far beyond human capability. Each procedure was executed quickly, without error, leaving the animal intact except for the removed organs. A clean surgical extraction performed as though the animal were simply a living specimen in a laboratory. Every detail suggested preparation, study, and purpose. The creatures did not act randomly. They moved like researchers conducting repeated experiments, recording data through each removal. Precision was paramount, stealth essential. Their actions left no traditional trace of violence, yet the results were unmistakable. The animals were altered, hollowed, and cataloged in a way that defied any earthly explanation. After the extraction, the creatures engaged in their final stage, relocation and environmental control. Under the cover of night, they lifted the animals with silent strength, returning them to the exact locations from which they had been taken. The fields remained pristine. No drag marks, no footprints, no evidence of transportation betrayed the scene. Their observation of the terrain extended over weeks or months, as hovering orbs and silent crafts scouted the area, selecting the next target with care and precision. Even more unsettling was the repulsion effect left behind. Carcasses remained untouched by scavengers, predators, or insects for weeks, sometimes months. Wolves, coyotes, vultures, and even smaller insects avoided the bodies entirely. Some fields showed no disturbance at all, as if the very life around the corpse recoiled. The aliens appeared to exert a subtle, unseen control, whether through chemical treatment, electromagnetic influence, or energy fields that made the corpses biologically hazardous or repellent. These measures reinforced both stealth and danger. Any human or animal interference was prevented, preserving the integrity of the samples and ensuring no contamination. The combination of perfect placement, environmental manipulation, and biological isolation turned each site into a sealed laboratory of their design. The creatures moved with calculated intelligence, leaving behind landscapes that were unnervingly silent, meticulously arranged, and utterly alien. The evidence left in the wake of these events forms an undeniable pattern. Blood drained completely from the animals, precise surgical excisions removed eyes, ears, lips, tongues, and reproductive organs, and the scenes were manipulated with such perfection that not a footprint or drag mark betrayed the operation. Each method points to intelligence and technology far beyond any earthly predator, confirming that these acts could not have been carried out by natural forces. Human hands might replicate some aspects in theory, yet the speed, accuracy, and flawless execution suggest a presence entirely alien. The motives behind such operations remain speculative but chilling. The harvesting of biological material hints at systematic experimentation, an ongoing study of Earth's living organisms. Genetic analysis, reproductive sampling, or unknown physiological research may be the purpose, yet the full scope of intent remains hidden. Some have even proposed theological interpretations: fallen angels, demonic entities, or extraterrestrial beings enacting designs beyond human understanding. The deliberate, methodical nature of the acts leaves no room for randomness. Every movement is calculated, every sample collected with intent. A single haunting question persists. Why are these occurrences concentrated almost exclusively in the United States, leaving the rest of the world untouched? The selective geography adds another layer of mystery, suggesting observation, planning, and a purpose linked to location. For those who witness or investigate these events, the implications are profound. Humanity may be observing an extraterrestrial program unfolding in plain sight, a silent experiment against which we are powerless to intervene. Each hollowed carcass and untouched pasture becomes a call to examine the unknown, to investigate beyond the confines of our planet, and to confront the unsettling reality that we are not alone and perhaps have never been. If this mystery captivates you, leave a comment with your theories and experiences. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the unexplained and the extraterrestrial. Forget everything you know about gravity and time. Deep beneath Kentucky's Mammoth Cave lies a permanent, fundamental tear in the fabric of space-time. SCP-1351, the Mobius Cave. This is where reality unravels. Today, we break down the Foundation's sealed files to explore the forbidden events and terrifying scientific hypotheses suggesting this cave is not mere geology, but a cosmic warning. To understand the horror of SCP-1351, you must first understand the context. The SCP Foundation operates on a simple mandate: secure, contain, protect. Their enemy is the anomalous, the things that violate consensus reality. SCP-1351 is classified as Euclid. This means its behavior is unpredictable, its capabilities are immense, and its containment requires constant vigilance. Its location is ironic, hidden in plain sight within the Mammoth Cave National Park. While thousands of tourists explore the safe, beautiful caverns, only a few hundred meters away, under the guise of the SEHER Bat Preserve, lies the true horror. Discovered in 1995 by speleologists mapping potential connections to the main park system, initial expeditions immediately yielded results that shattered all known geological and physical models. The entrance itself is the first clue. A strange, almost perfectly circular hole in the ceiling of an underground chamber, 125 meters below the surface, a path that demands a descent upward to begin. The three expedition teams between 1995 and 2002 established one undeniable truth. The warp tunnels within 1351 operate entirely outside Newtonian physics. It's reported that the gravity you experience is entirely dependent on the angle of the floor, and the floor itself can twist and loop, reassuming positions parallel to its original location, a geometric nightmare that creates its own internal gravitational field. Inside 1351, time moves on its own terms. A researcher entering for what they perceive as 20 minutes may emerge to find that 3 hours have passed in the outside world. This temporal distortion is not linear. It is random, volatile, and inexplicable. The combination of unpredictable gravity, self-looping geometry, and shattered time defines 1351, transforming a mere cave into a weapon of abstract terror. How does the Foundation contain such a fundamental break in reality? With a perimeter fence, unauthorized vehicle warnings, and a security team dressed as park rangers and civilian speleologists, a thin veil of normalcy draped over the edge of the abyss. This is the stage. Now let's look at the events the Foundation keeps deliberately classified. The Foundation's top minds have developed three primary, terrifying hypotheses to explain the geometry and power of the Mobius Cave. These are not just scientific theories, they are philosophical nightmares. Hypothesis Alpha: the Mobius strip and the wormhole torsion is the simplest, most elegant, and arguably the most frightening explanation. The Mobius Cave is the embodiment of a mathematical construct made real. A Mobius strip is a two-dimensional object that, when twisted, becomes one-sided. In the case of 1351, this is happening in 3 dimensions. The cave is a permanent, self-looping wormhole. The tunnels aren't physically linked, they are topologically connected. When you enter, you are traveling along a single continuous surface that lacks a defined inside or outside, up or down. The shifting gravity is merely the effect of the traveler constantly switching which side of the dimensional surface they are occupying. This implies that the cave is a flaw in reality itself, a geological impossibility that has been made physically manifest. The victims like Laska and Dunbar were not killed by a creature or a trap. but by the pure, unyielding logic of a flawed mathematical equation that their three-dimensional bodies could not solve. It suggests that the laws of physics we hold so dear are merely superficial rules that can be broken by extreme geometry. Hypothesis Beta, the 4D extraterrestrial transit station, introduces a more chilling cosmic element. What if the cave isn't naturally occurring? What if it's the remnant of something artificial? This theory proposes that SCP-1351 is not a cave, but the three-dimensional shadow of a structure existing in the fourth spatial dimension, a dimension we can only perceive as constantly shifting geometry. The inexplicable, unpredictable gravity changes are not errors in the cave, but the rules of the fourth dimension being imposed upon our reality. The weight shifts, the twists, the loops, these are merely the up, down, and sideways of a four-dimensional object that is constantly moving relative to our three-dimensional plane. This leads directly to the idea of the cave as an extraterrestrial transit station. If an advanced alien civilization could perceive and manipulate the fourth dimension, they could use 1351 as a natural, pre-existing gateway, a cosmic subway stop, allowing for instantaneous travel across unimaginable distances. The temporal anomalies would be a byproduct of their faster-than-light travel methods leaking into our timeline. The cave isn't a destination, it's the loading ramp for interstellar voyages. The final hypothesis Gamma, the stain and the alien contamination most insidious theory, casts 1351 as a scar on reality. This hypothesis suggests that a massive dimension-hopping entity or a cosmic vessel once passed through this exact point in Kentucky. The sheer energy or biological force required to breach our reality left an energetic stain, a permanent zone of contamination. The physical warping, the flattening of D8334, and the time dilation are all residual effects, like radiation sickness of the universe. The entity is long gone, but its passing has permanently thinned the barrier between our world and the voids it traverses. The Moebius Cave is simply the place where the wound never healed, proving that the borders of our reality are far more fragile than we dare to admit. To fully grasp the unique terror of SCP-1351, we must place it next to one of the most psychologically devastating spatial anomalies in Foundation history, SCP-3001, the Red Reality. Comparing these two nightmares illuminates the different ways reality can break. SCP-1351 is a geometric nightmare, a space-time torsion. It twists physical rock into a mathematically impossible loop. The horror is that the material world is present, but the rules of engagement are wrong. Conversely, SCP-3001 is a hole in everything, an extra-dimensional void utterly devoid of light and gravity. The horror of 3001 is the absence of everything. In 1351, the horror is physical and immediate. Death comes from the mechanical violence of space-time, where victims are crushed and geometrically reduced. It is the ultimate body horror. In 3001, the horror is psychological and protracted. Dr. Anderson was suspended in an agonizing limbo of isolation, facing existential decay. It is the ultimate psychological horror. The classification irony persists. SCP-3001 is safe because its void is static and predictable. SCP-1351 remains Euclid because its internal mechanics, the gravity shifts and random geometry, are volatile, unpredictable, and potentially contagious. Both manipulate time, but 1351 causes chaotic shifts, 20 minutes in, hours later out, inflicting the trauma of lost continuity. 3001 causes extreme, consistent dilation, minutes feel like years, inflicting the trauma of suffering's endless extension. We return to the Moebius Cave. Whether it's a natural wormhole or an alien dock, its implications are profound. The fragility of our reality. SCP-1351 proves that our stable, three-dimensional world can be shattered by a single geometric twist, a cosmic ripple. The ultimate horror is the fate of D8334, the paper person. This cave demonstrates the potential for dimensional collapse, the annihilation of a human being from 3 dimensions to 2. This permanent open wound, this scar on space-time, is not healing. The Foundation fights a geological anomaly that behaves like a sentient mathematical construct, daring scientists to find the error in its logic. The Moebius Cave is a cosmic riddle that asks, is our reality the intended design, or merely a temporary structure waiting to be folded, twisted, and collapsed by the true, abstract geometry of the universe. The foundation guards the entrance, but they cannot guard the idea. The idea that time can betray you, and that the ground beneath your feet could be a single, continuous, terrifying surface leading nowhere you recognize. What do you think is hiding inside the Mobius cave? Is it an alien dock, or a wound that will eventually bleed into our world? Let us know your theories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more explorations into the classified files of the SCP Foundation. Until next time, stay safe. Welcome to the Deep Archives. For decades, the public narrative of alien encounters has been dominated by the gray entity, small, frail, and clinical. But what happens when the grays are simply the staff, and the true power rests with a commanding presence operating from a hidden royal court? This is the story of Filiberto Cardenas, a Cuban immigrant in Miami, 1979, whose experience didn't just document an abduction, it exposed a rigid, terrifying hierarchy operating beneath our world. The late 1970s in South Florida were volatile, a blend of Cold War paranoia and a cultural explosion of the burgeoning UFO phenomenon. Cardenas's case, however, transcended the sensationalism of the era. It became a cornerstone of ufology due to an unprecedented combination of evidence: multiple external eyewitnesses to the event, 108 quantifiable physical marks left on the victim's body, and the subsequent, highly consistent testimony under repeated hypnotic regression. This wasn't hearsay. This was an investigation with tangible evidence, classified as a close encounter of the fourth kind, CE4K. Tonight, we detail the evidence that proves the existence of the chief. The date was late January 1979. Filiberto Cardenas was driving with 3 friends on a remote road outside Hialeah near the Everglades. The atmosphere was calm until 1:45 a.m. when, without warning, the vehicle died instantly. This classic electromagnetic effect, EMF signature, where an advanced energy source neutralizes ground-based electronics, was the first red flag. Their quartz wristwatch, a simple timing device, also ceased function simultaneously, a deliberate surgical act of isolation. As panic set in, a massive, silent, disc-shaped craft descended slowly nearby. Its sheer size was immense, casting a disproportionately eerie glow on the secluded garden where the car was immobilized. According to the friends, Cardenas, standing outside the car, was struck by an unseen, powerful force field. He was rendered instantly catatonic and paralyzed, a physiological shutdown preventing resistance. Before the horrified eyes of his 3 companions, Filiberto was levitated, slowly and silently lifted, into the belly of the immense, hovering ship. The 3 friends, terrified and unable to start the car, fled the scene on foot. Their subsequent consistent testimony became a critical initial piece of corroboration for investigators. Crucially, this event was not isolated. Reports later verified that air traffic control, ATC personnel at a nearby airport detected an unidentified flying object exhibiting extreme velocity and unusual maneuvers in the vicinity at the exact time Cardenas vanished. This official, multiple-source confirmation elevated the Cardenas case from a simple abduction claim to a documented investigation supported by external observational data. Inside the craft, the terrifying medical procedure began. Filiberto recalled being in a large, cold, brightly lit room staffed by the classic gray entities. They were short, approximately 4 feet tall, with large black, almond-shaped eyes and smooth, grayish skin. He described them as emotionless technicians, utilizing strange small tools to perform a comprehensive, intrusive physical examination. The most damning and unique piece of physical evidence was what Cardenas carried back: 108 small, perfectly circular marks etched across his body. These were documented by investigators, notably on his upper chest, back, and limbs. These were not scars. They were fresh, meticulously placed pinpoint punctures or microburns. The exact count, 108, is highly suggestive of a calculated, methodical process, potentially a diagnostic tally, biosampling array, or, most chillingly, the installation points for an advanced neuromonitoring device. Cardenas returned bearing a quantified physical receipt of the encounter, separating his account from almost every other abduction narrative in history. The medical examination was only the preliminary step. Cardenas was next transported to a massive, complex facility. He described being moved to a cavernous area, an immense underground or undersea base, a highly technological chamber that felt like an artificial cave or deep-sea habitat. This detail immediately links the Cardenas file to theories of non-interplanetary but subterranean or hollow Earth operations. Here, he encountered the entity that revealed the true structure of the operation: the Chief. This being was dramatically different from the Greys, tall, standing between 6 and 7 feet, majestic and uniquely intimidating. He wore a long, flowing, dark yellow or gold cape and sat upon a large, ornate throne. He was the master, the obvious figure of authority in this terrifying royal court. The biggest revelation was the communication. The Chief spoke not only telepathically but verbally, in perfect, flowing Spanish. This suggests either an ancient integration into human culture or the ability to instantaneously synthesize complex language, a profound technological capability that eliminates the need for telepathic ambiguity. The Chief delivered a solemn and direct warning. Humanity was on a definitive path to self-destruction, primarily through environmental ruin and endless warfare. He stated that the alien program was a genetic preservation effort. They were meticulously collecting and studying human samples to ensure the continuation of the species should Earth fail to sustain itself. This confirmed Cardenas's terrifying realization. His abduction was part of a planetary-scale intervention, not a random scouting mission. Before Cardenas was returned, the Chief presented him with a concrete piece of evidence, a small, heavy metallic ring inscribed with alien symbols. The object became the most coveted piece of hard evidence. Investigators attempted to analyze the material, looking for isotopic anomalies or unidentifiable elements. While laboratory results were often inconclusive, a common outcome for alleged alien artifacts, the unique, non-terrestrial symbols inscribed upon it cemented its role as the Chief's definitive, physical stamp on the encounter. It wasn't just a gift, it was a psychological anchor, a constant reminder of his ownership and the secrets he carried. The ordeal continued. Weeks after his return, Filiberto received a powerful telepathic summons. They wanted him back, and this time he was instructed to bring his wife, Margarita Cardenas. The second abduction, which included Margarita, provided the final, powerful piece of corroboration. The investigation was led by respected ufologist Virgilio Sanchez Osejo. Recognizing the limitations of conscious recall in traumatic events, both Filiberto and Margarita underwent multiple, separate sessions of hypnotic regression with different specialists. The results were astonishing. Under deep hypnosis, both Filiberto and Margarita recounted their experiences: the paralysis, the Greys, the Chief, the subterranean base, and the medical procedures, with unwavering consistency across all sessions and all practitioners. This includes the consistent description of the Chief's appearance, the Golden Throne, and the purpose of the genetic program. While skeptics often cite regression therapy as prone to confabulation, creating false memories through suggestion, the dense, complex, and harmonious overlap of details between the two independent witnesses convinced many professional researchers that they were dealing with genuine, suppressed memories of a shared, traumatic reality. The Cardenas file is a masterclass in organized terror. It forces a fundamental shift in ufology. The small, silent Greys are merely the technicians and the workforce. The true command rests with the tall, regal Chief on the Golden Throne, an entity with the authority to grant physical evidence and deliver planetary mandates. This implies a chilling multi-species hierarchy, where the Greys serve as the expendable pawns in a far grander scheme of information gathering and genetic intervention. The most disturbing implication is the subterranean agenda. If the Chief is operating not from a distant galaxy like Zeta Reticuli, but from a vast, high-tech network beneath the Florida Straits, then the threat is not millions of light years away. It is integrated into the very fabric of our planet. This supports the terrifying hypothesis that these entities are not casual space visitors, but ancient Earth inhabitants, or highly integrated operatives who have been here hidden all along. The convergence of evidence, the 108 physical marks, the unusual metallic ring, and the consistent testimonies, is not merely proof of an encounter. It is a signature of alien ownership. The Cardenas family was branded and monitored. Their legacy is a reminder that the phenomenon of alien abduction is not just about lights in the sky. It's about a methodical, intelligent, and ongoing interaction with humanity, dictated by the powerful masters on the hidden thrones. What do you believe the 108 marks represent? Was it a biological diagnostic receipt, or a piece of tracking technology installed by the chief? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and tell us which level of the alien hierarchy you fear the most. The Antarctic night was a compression of swirling snow and wind. Dr. Elias Vance worked outside the Outpost Gamma habitat, lowering a deep penetration sonar scanner onto a patch of ancient ice. The data returned an impossible signature. His internal log recorded the findings. Log entry 58, subject subglacial anomaly. The readings defy conventional understanding. The size is astronomical, 5 kilometers beneath the ice sheet, and the profile is unnerving. A vast, perfectly circular metallic structure. This is deliberate, non-terrestrial engineering. It does not belong to the ice, the rock, or the history of mankind. The magnitude of the discovery was a cold certainty, an artifact of unimaginable provenance. Vance prepared to retract the scanner, but the environment suddenly fractured. The wind died instantly, replaced by a vacuum of silence. Looking up, the sky, stripped of the aurora, held a single, potent, yellow-white light. It hung motionless. The electronic world immediately collapsed. His compass spun wildly, settling on the ground. His radio went dead after static, and his chronograph flashed random time zones. My brain registered a categorical event breach. This was not a geomagnetic anomaly. This was focused, intelligent interference. Vance felt the deep, biological tremor of the unknown, but his analytical self seized control. The light began a controlled descent, contracting into a tight, focused cone directly above the drill site. The ice beneath his boots began a low internal vibration, causing fine dust particles to rise and shimmer. Vance stopped his retreat. Retreat guarantees nothing but the loss of data. Survival is secondary to documentation. He made a conscious choice. He activated his hardened field camera and audio recorder, directing them toward the mesmerizing light source. The light swelled, changing from focused yellow to a consuming, absolute white. The humming beneath his feet escalated, pressing against his chest. He managed a final, blinding glance upward as the light consumed his vision. The overwhelming intensity rendered the scene void, erasing the boundary between ice and observer. The camera's final frame recorded only the silent, white ignition of his abduction. This was the unavoidable pivot, the moment science was abandoned for the reality of the impossible. Elias Vance was jolted from the void by profound, unnatural cold. His eyes snapped open. He was naked, weightless, suspended in a thick, perfectly clear liquid that coated his skin. The sound of his own breathing was a hollow, frantic gurgle. He was sealed within a massive, flawless cylindrical tube, a monumental test tube of seamless crystalline material. Panic asserted itself. He thrashed, slamming his forearm against the curved wall, generating only weak ripples in the fluid. I am sealed. I am submerged. The material is impossible to breach. The terror was amplified by the silence. The environment outside the liquid was noiseless, yet overwhelmingly present. He forced his vision past the liquid surface. The interior of the vessel was a vast spherical space, sheathed in a matte, silver-white metal, a clinical architecture of absolute curved sterility. Through the translucent wall, he saw them, the Watchers, shadowy figures, unnaturally slender with large, domed craniums. He could only discern the absolute, reflective blackness of their colossal eyes, regarding his plight with impassive scrutiny. He was the sample. Fine, metallic filaments, thinner than hair, extended through the tube wall, adhering precisely to his nerve clusters, his temples, neck, and wrists. They glowed faintly, transmitting data. On a nearby panel, the data was rendered not in human characters, but in a stream of flowing geometric symbols depicting his state, heartbeat, respiration, and the rapid, complex flux of his neural activity. Every signal is quantified. My suffering is merely data. A sophisticated, segmented robotic arm extended from the ceiling, its motion frictionless. It carried a focused orange-red beam emitter, which swept the length of his body. The arm projected a chillingly detailed holographic rendering onto the observation wall, a three-dimensional map of his internal systems. His skeletal frame in cold blue, his organs in faint green, and the dense electrical network of his brain pulsed in violet, a real-time dissection presented without apology. As the arm retreated, Vance managed to twist slightly. He saw an adjacent tube, identical to his own. Suspended within that liquid was another figure, human-sized, completely motionless, skin ethereal, pale white. The realization was a crushing weight in the fluid. This is not a chaotic event. This is a recurring operation. I am not the first, nor am I likely to be the last. I am simply the newest entry in a systematic ledger of biological research. I am a data point in their immense ongoing program. The clinical precision of the facility was the true source of horror. The experiments intensified. The liquid around him darkened, turning a milky, aggressive yellow. Sensory overload became the means of measurement. A wave of searing heat caused involuntary muscular spasms, immediately followed by a profound, draining cold. The geometric symbols outside flashed wildly. He felt a deep, sharp, invasive pain at the back of his neck, the sensation of a foreign object being inserted or extracted. He thrashed, but the effort was futile, dissolving into weak bubbles. Through a distant, curved viewport, he saw a small, fragile blue marble, Earth. He was far beyond the atmosphere. There is no escape. I am entirely within their dominion, millions of miles from the safety of any known jurisdiction. The isolation was total. A new device descended directly above the crown of his stasis tube. It emitted a rhythmic, hypnotic light, timed perfectly to the violet energy output of his neural mapping. Vance felt a sudden, terrifying shift in his consciousness, a profound existential detachment. His entire life, his memories, began to stream across his internal vision in a chaotic reversed rush. They are not merely reading the information. They are cataloging, copying, and perhaps fundamentally altering the source code of my identity. His awareness began to dim. The tube's clinical light faded to a gray haze. The hum of the machinery ceased to register. He was overwhelmed by the conviction that his narrative was over, his consciousness about to be reduced to sterile data in an alien archive. My body is lost. My freedom is gone. Now, my entire history, my very sense of self, is being professionally, clinically erased. The light finally extinguished itself. In the aftermath of the blackout, total silence enveloped Vance. He existed in a void of consciousness. Then, a thin, needle-like spike of light appeared, not the sterile blue of the lab, but a sharp, frigid external light. His awareness accelerated toward this single point, seemingly passing through a non-space. He was recovering, not fragments of memory, but the raw recording of his capture. This is not their playback. This is my mind's final desperate download, retrieving the one moment of absolute truth before the surgical memory excision. The image stabilized, the small, insignificant research habitat, the vast, menacing sky, and his own figure standing alone on the ice. He understood that he was being given a final, unedited view of the event that brought him to the sterile tube. From his recovered memory camera perspective, the scene achieved terrifying clarity. The dark, seamless hull of the teardrop-shaped vessel was suspended above the clouds, encircled by a potent corona of golden light. He saw his tiny silhouette on the white expanse, looking upward. Without warning, a massive, focused column of pure golden energy erupted from the vessel's underside, striking the ice precisely at his location. The force was palpable, even in memory. Scientific instruments, ice shards, and compacted snow were caught in the field, spiraling upward in a chaotic vortex. His body was immediately seized and lifted, pulled vertically, trapped within the center of the brilliant golden cylinder. He was reduced to a small dark form ascending rapidly into the craft's dark underbelly. The sound was a low, deep, visceral rumble that eclipsed his own frantic heartbeat. In the blinding instant before the light consumed him entirely, the certainty was absolute. This is the mechanism, the precise, overwhelming force that erased my reality and transported me to the lab. This golden beam is the clean, efficient tool of my abduction. This raw, terrifying image was the final, definitive data point delivered to his mind. The golden light achieved maximum intensity, a solid, white detonation, and then, abruptly, vanished. Vance found himself lying on his back, gasping on the icy surface. The sky was a non-committal gray. Beside him, pressed into the ancient ice, was a faint, geometric circle, the ghostly imprint of the vessel's landing field. He sat up, his head throbbing. Everything between the moment he raised his camera and the moment he woke up was gone. a successful excision of memory. He pulled off his glove and instinctively rubbed the nape of his neck. His fingers located a small circular scar at the base of his skull, a fresh, geometric incision. He forced a logical, rational conclusion. Hypoxia. Severe hypothermia. I must have simply collapsed and drifted into unconsciousness. Nothing more. Yet the final, persistent thought remained. I do not recall the events that transpired, but in the quiet moments between wakefulness and sleep, the terrifying pull of a brilliant golden light often returns, and I carry the certainty of having been pulled, however briefly, from the surface of this earth. Can you believe this? A massive animal weighing over a ton is found dead, but at the scene, there isn't a single drop of blood left. It didn't just bleed out. 100% of the blood in its body was completely drained. Welcome to one of the greatest mysteries of modern history, cattle mutilation. This isn't science fiction. It started back in the 1970s, and believe me, it's coming back stronger than ever in 2024. So who's behind it? Aliens, the US, government, or some kind of dark spiritual force? Let's try to find the answer. A wolf or a mountain lion leaves a mess. They tear flesh, they drag the body, and they leave blood splattered across the grass. But in these cases, the scene is sterile. It is a surgical theater in the middle of a muddy pasture. The most baffling and consistent characteristic, the signature of these killings, is the blood. We are talking about full-grown bulls and cows, animals containing gallons of fluid, found completely exsanguinated. There is no pool of blood on the ground. There are no tracks leading away. In many necropsy reports, pathologists have noted that there isn't even a single blood cell left in the capillaries. To achieve this level of extraction requires industrial-grade pumps and time, equipment that simply shouldn't exist in the dark silence of a farm field. Then there are the injuries themselves, which are grotesque yet clinically precise. The attackers always target specific soft tissues. The eyes are cored out of their sockets, the ears are removed, and the tongue is sliced off deep from the throat, often pulled out through an incision in the neck that shouldn't be physically possible. Frequently, the reproductive organs are excised with clean, circular cuts. These aren't rips caused by teeth. They are smooth, microscopic incisions. Under lab analysis, the tissue often shows signs of high-heat cauterization, suggesting the use of a laser-like instrument that cuts and seals the wound simultaneously to prevent bleeding. In some of the most disturbing cases, investigators have found perfect holes drilled into the animal's jaw, extending deep into the brain case, through which the entire brain and eyeballs appear to have been suctioned out. No known animal on Earth possesses the ability to drill through bone and extract a brain without crushing the skull. We need to look at the data coming out of Australia. Reports of unexplained stock mutilations down under go all the way back to the 1950s, decades before the FBI ever opened a file in the US. This shatters the idea that this is a modern copycat phenomenon. In Australia, the victims weren't just cattle. Sheep were, and still are, primary targets. The modus operandi is identical: the surgical removal of the jaw, the missing tongue, the lack of blood. The fact that this was happening in the 1950s on a completely different continent tells us that whatever intelligence is behind this has been operating globally for nearly a century. Furthermore, if we shift our gaze to South America, the numbers are staggering and, frankly, criminally underreported by the Western press. Since the year 2000, there have been estimates of anywhere between 2,500 to 3,000 confirmed cases of animal mutilation across the continent. Argentina, Brazil, and Chile have been absolute hotspots for this activity. 3,000 cases. Let that number sink in. That is not a series of isolated pranks. That is a systematic operation. In these South American cases, the details remain hauntingly consistent with what we see in Oregon and Utah. The animals are stripped of their senses, eyes, ears, tongue, and drained of fluid. The sheer volume of cases in South America suggests that this isn't just a random sampling. It looks like a harvest. The fact that the mainstream news rarely covers the international scope of this issue makes you wonder if there's a deliberate attempt to keep the public thinking this is just a quirky American ghost story, rather than a worldwide intrusion. When you combine the Australian historical data regarding sheep with the massive volume of South American cattle cases, the American-centric theory falls apart, leaving us with something much more vast and frightening. It implies that the entire planet is being used as a biological laboratory by an entity that views borders as irrelevant. Despite this global history, we cannot ignore the massive spike that has just occurred in the United States. Fast forward to late 2024. The silence has been broken. On December 28, 2024, reports began flooding in, specifically from the state of Oregon. We are seeing a resurgence that rivals the panic of the 1970s. Local authorities in Oregon, specifically in places like Grant County, are overwhelmed. We aren't talking about one or two cows. We are talking about hundreds of calls to police stations from different farms and ranches over the last few months. The timing is suspicious, and the intensity is escalating. One recent case involved a bull that was killed and mutilated with classic mutilation hallmarks. The owner described a scene that defied logic: a prize bull, dead, hollowed out, with no tracks leading to or from the body. What makes the 2024 wave different from the 1970s is our observational technology. Back then, it was just word of mouth. Now, we are starting to see a correlation that can no longer be dismissed: the direct presence of UFOs. Over the past 3 months, coinciding exactly with this spike in cattle deaths, there have been hundreds of sightings of unidentified flying objects over these specific farming regions. These aren't your typical silver saucers. The descriptions are consistent: bright orange orbs, sometimes black objects that glow with an orange halo, hovering silently over the livestock. One rancher provided a testimony that gives us a chilling glimpse into the high-tech nature of these encounters. He described seeing a bright orange light, about the size of a beach ball, floating just above the ground near his herd. This wasn't a drone. It made absolutely no sound. No humming, no engine noise, just dead silence. As he watched, this orb split into 2 separate objects of the same size. It defies the laws of physics. Conservation of mass doesn't work that way, yet he watched it happen. One of the orbs then shot off toward the north, accelerating from 0 to thousands of miles per hour in a split second, vanishing instantly. Minutes later, he checked his herd and found his steer mutilated. When you combine the eyewitness accounts of these silent, splitting orbs with the surgical precision found on the animals, the conclusion becomes very difficult to avoid. This technology is not from a local coyote pack, and it certainly doesn't look like standard human aircraft. This brings us to the inevitable question: who is doing this? The theories generally fall into 3 camps. The first, and the one that seems to fit the physical evidence best, is the extraterrestrial hypothesis. The correlation between the orange orbs and the dead cattle is too strong to ignore. The theory posits that these beings are conducting biological monitoring. Why the soft tissues? Why the eyes and tongues? Scientists speculate that these are the areas where genetic material and environmental toxins are most concentrated. If you were an alien species monitoring the health of this planet, cows are the perfect biological bellwether. They are everywhere. They eat the grass. They are part of the human food supply. The complete draining of blood could be for the manufacturing of a nutrient or fuel we don't understand. The technology displayed, including silent propulsion, laser cutters, and the ability to lift 2-ton animals without tracks, points to a capability far beyond current human science. However, we cannot rule out the second theory, the government or military-industrial complex. This theory suggests we are being deceived by our own leaders. Proponents argue that the aliens are a cover story to mask illegal testing of biological weapons. Could these mutilations be a way of tracking prions like mad cow disease or testing new nerve agents? The argument is that if the government were doing this, they would want you to blame Martians. It's the perfect camouflage. If a rancher says the government killed my cow, people listen. If he says a UFO killed my cow, he gets laughed at. It's a convenient way to discredit witnesses. Then there is the third angle, the occult and spiritual theory. In the 70s, newspapers blamed devil worshippers. While cultists usually leave a mess, the spiritual angle has persisted. Many view these entities not as space travelers, but as interdimensional beings, what the Bible might call fallen angels or demons. They point to the cruelty and the mockery of nature involved in these mutilations as inherently evil. They argue that these entities are harvesting energy or fear, and that the increase in activity in 2024 is a precursor to a major spiritual event or the rise of the Antichrist. Cultural products like the video game Grey Hill Incident are starting to reflect this trauma, allowing players to experience the terror of a ranch invasion. But for the farmers in Oregon, this is no game. After analyzing the bloodless corpses, the surgical precision, and the global history from Australian sheep to South American cattle, one nagging question remains. While this is a global phenomenon, why does the sheer intensity of the high strangeness seem to concentrate so heavily on the United States during specific windows of time? Why Oregon? Why now? Is there something specific about the geography of the American West? Or is the United States simply the primary stage for a contact event that is slowly escalating? It feels like a message is being sent. When you leave a mutilated cow out in a field, unable to be eaten by nature, stripped of its eyes and blood, you are leaving a billboard. You are saying, "We can do this and you cannot stop us." The rise in cases in late 2024 suggests that whatever this program is, it is accelerating. The quiet years might be over. As we move further into this decade, we might be approaching a disclosure event not by government admission, but by the undeniable volume of evidence piling up in our pastures. So what do you think? Are the 3,000 cases in South America proof of an alien harvest? Is the Australian history proof of a century-long experiment? Or is this a government psychological operation? The evidence is there for anyone brave enough to look. If you live in these rural areas, keep your eyes on the sky. And if you see those orange lights, lock your doors. Because whatever is out there, it's hungry, it's precise, and it is not asking for permission. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the dark corners of our reality and want to stay updated on the weirdest phenomena happening around the globe, from the paranormal to the unexplained, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Drop a like if you want to see more investigations like this. Until next time, keep asking questions, stay safe, and watch the skies. What if the plague doctors who walked through medieval France were never human at all, but the first prototypes of SCP-049 sent by something watching us from the dark? People often recount the European plague through cold statistics, but in the documents the Foundation keeps deliberately sealed away, one peculiar detail repeats itself like an ink stain that refuses to fade. Wherever death spread the fastest, a figure wearing a beaked mask always appeared a few hours beforehand. No one knew where he came from. They only knew that when he knocked on a door, a few days later, the entire household would be breathing the air of the dead. Ancient records describe him in the trembling language of those who witnessed something indescribable. His clothing gathered no dust, repelled water, and when touched, it was hard like metal, yet stretched like skin. We found no seams, and we never once saw him breathe. He resembled a creature wrapped in darkness more than a doctor. Some witnesses even swore that he walked without touching the ground, as if his legs were nothing more than a borrowed imitation of a form that did not truly belong to humanity. People of that time called him the Angel of Extinction, for wherever he paused, the plague swept through like fire, devouring dry wood. What horrified Foundation researchers the most was not the folklore itself, but the uncanny resemblance between those mysterious plague doctors and SCP-049. A suit that cannot be removed, a mask fused to the flesh, movements devoid of fatigue, and a line he once spoke, a line no one could decipher. "I have been here before, and I do not belong to any age of man." If that is true, then the beaked doctors, wandering through plague-ridden Europe, were not bearers of medicine at all, but beings created to observe humanity, entities whose origin lies in a place the Foundation refuses to name, where disease, biology, and intellect are manipulated like pieces in an ancient game played by alien species. And then a question rises like a shiver crawling up the spine. Are we truly certain who came to heal us, and who may have brought the sickness in the first place? In every surviving account of plague doctors, one detail repeats with unsettling precision. No one ever saw their real faces. They were covered completely from head to toe, revealing not a single inch of skin, not even a breath that belonged to a living person. When this is compared with SCP-049, the resemblance becomes disturbing. The mask and robe of SCP-049 are not garments, but a part of its biological structure, a layer of living tissue fused with armor-like material. This absolute concealment stops being a medical precaution and begins to resemble a biological identity, suggesting that these figures may never have been human at all. Witnesses during the European plague reported that plague doctors moved without sound. Some even described them as gliding over the ground. SCP-049 shows the same abnormality. Foundation thermal scanners reveal that SCP-049 does not produce stable thermal footprints and moves with a perfectly smooth, controlled rhythm, free from the weight shifts and reflexive reactions of a human body. When two sets of data separated by 6 centuries match so closely, coincidence becomes a weak explanation. These figures appear to follow a completely different locomotion mechanism, something more precise, more controlled, and undeniably inhuman. The brutal truth of history is that plague doctors cured almost no one. Even stranger, death often increased immediately after their visit. They seemed less like healers and more like observers, silently confirming or extracting something from the sick. SCP-049 demonstrates the same behavior. It does not heal in the human sense, but transforms its victims into altered entities that serve its mysterious purpose. Within the context of extraterrestrial biology, a chilling theory emerges. These plague doctors were not combating illness but searching for a specific pathogen, mutation, or biological signature invisible to human understanding. Some preserved plague doctor attire has baffled modern researchers. The material does not burn, does not tear, does not rot, and stretches with the elasticity of living tissue. SCP-049's biological shroud displays the same qualities. It cannot be cut, cannot be analyzed chemically, and shows a molecular pattern unknown on Earth. These traits strongly suggest that the so-called protective suits of medieval plague doctors may not have been garments at all, but a type of extraterrestrial exosuit, grown rather than manufactured, similar to the adaptive flesh armor that SCP-049 possesses. People of the Middle Ages were terrified to see plague doctors stand motionless for hours, not breathing, not eating, not drinking water, and not reacting to cold or exhaustion. SCP-049 displays identical patterns. It does not need food, sleep, or any kind of nourishment. It never shows fatigue or biological decline. When observed together, these behaviors point to a single conclusion. These beings did not rely on human physiology at all. Their bodies follow a different set of biological rules, possibly artificial, hybrid, or originating from an environment where oxygen, heat, and rest are irrelevant. Some areas where plague doctors once walked contain records of circular burn marks on the ground, as if the soil had been heated by a source of energy beyond medieval understanding. These marks resemble modern UFO landing traces and correspond closely to abnormal heat readings recorded around SCP-049. When medieval reports, modern UFO cases, and Foundation sensor data all describe the same type of thermal anomaly, the idea of an extraterrestrial device or biological field becomes more convincing than coincidence. Historians have long noted the strange timing of these figures. They appeared exactly when the plague reached its peak and vanished just as the outbreak faded. In some cases, they were seen before the disease even entered a region, as if they could sense it. SCP-049 has claimed that it has visited this world many times before and speaks with a familiarity that suggests a long history with human pandemics. If these beings belonged to a species that monitored the evolution of terrestrial illnesses, their timing would make perfect sense. They were following biological cycles, not human events. When all the signs are woven together, a disturbing pattern emerges. Clothing not made by humans, physiology incompatible with human needs, movements that defy gravity, timing that aligns with disease waves, and behaviors focused on biological modification rather than healing. These connections make the theory almost unavoidable. The mysterious plague doctors in medieval France were likely not human physicians, but early manifestations of SCP-049, or members of the same extraterrestrial species sent to collect, analyze, and manipulate pathogens according to an unknown interstellar purpose. The most unsettling implication is not that they were here, but that they may never have left, and SCP-049 might be only one of many that still remain. The basement dispatch room in Santa Rosa is so quiet, Leona Ward can hear the fluorescent lights breathing. Then the clock flips to 2:11 a.m., and every line on her console lights up at once. Not one caller, not two, all of them. Static floods her headset, thick, wet-sounding interference like the desert itself is trying to talk through a dead radio. Voices break in and out, a man screaming, a child crying, a woman praying, then all of it collapses into a single, impossible silence. Leona leans closer to the screen, waiting for coordinates to populate. They don't. And then, without sound, without a phone line, a word lands inside her mind, cold and command-like, as if it's being read directly into her thoughts. Return. Leona has worked 911 dispatch for 12 years in a town so small it feels like a dot on the map. Santa Rosa, New Mexico, a stop along Route 54, a black ribbon of highway slicing through open desert. Her night shift runs midnight to 8 a.m. Most hours are nothing. Lonely motorists, stray animals, the occasional drunk who can't find the motel. Out here, the desert keeps its own schedule, and for reasons Leona can't explain, it started calling her at 2:11 a.m. Firstly, Leona answers a call drowned in thick static, like the signal is being squeezed. The man says his name is Michael Valdez. He's on Route 54, alone in the desert. He's terrified, not because something is following him, but because it's matching him. A cluster of bright lights holding steady distance, too clean, too steady, with no aircraft blink pattern. Then his voice tightens. Radio died, GPS died, phone's glitching, only 911 still connects. Leona tries to locate him. The system returns nothing, no coordinates, no map pin, like the call isn't coming from anywhere real. Michael says the road feels wrong, like he's driving into dense air. He swears he passed the same reflector post twice. The static swells and his voice warps for a second, still his but stretched thin. "It's not behind me anymore," he whispers. Leona asks where it is. A pause, in front, like it's waiting. He describes a perfect white line suspended in the air, too straight to be natural, hanging across the dark. And inside the glare, he says he can see figures, not shadows, more like silhouettes behind a veil, shifting when the light shifts. A low hum rises under the static. Michael starts to shout, "It's coming down," and the call cuts off mid-breath, clean and instant. Leona refreshes the archive. There's no recording, no normal log entry, only a corrupted 8-second file of pure static. PD patrols Route 54, no gray Honda, no skid marks, nothing. Later, they confirms Michael is home, confused, insisting he never went out. His car sits in the driveway, dust-caked, untouched. Leona can't forget the one impossible detail. Out there, whatever was happening, 911 was the only thing that could still hear him. 3 weeks later, Leona is back on the night shift, watching the clock slide toward 2:11 a.m. The line hits with that abrasive static, thicker than noise, like pressure. A woman gasps out her name, Sarah Baker. She's on Route 54, mile 265, and something is following her. Her GPS is frozen, her dash glitches, and yet somehow 911 still connects. Leona pings the call, her console answers with a blank field, as if Sarah is speaking from a place the map can't name. Sarah describes a light that isn't headlights, red-white pulses, steady as a heartbeat, hovering too high for any vehicle. Then her voice tightens. "My steering wheel's going stiff, like it's being held." The static swells. Sarah whispers that the brightness is opening like a seam, and inside it she can see tall, thin shapes stepping out, too long-limbed, too precise, as if they're copying how a person moves. Leona orders her to stop, lock the doors, stay inside. Sarah inhales sharply. "It's in front of me." There's a white click. The call ends cleanly. Leona checks the logs. No recording, no proper entry, just another gap. Patrol sweeps Route 54 and finds nothing. Later, another department confirms Sarah is home asleep, her car parked outside, no memory of leaving. Leona stares at the empty file slot, because now she's sure of one thing. Whatever owns 211 is learning. 3 weeks after Sarah's call, Leona stops trusting quiet. 2:11 a.m. All of it breaks. Not one call, several slamming into the console at once. Different lines, different voices, same panic threaded through them like a shared current. A man is yelling over wind and static that doesn't sound like weather. Mile 277, Route 54, we're stopped. He isn't saying we pulled over. He's saying we were made still. Behind his voice, a chorus, women crying, a kid screaming for someone to wake up, a car horn stuck down and then cutting off as if the sound itself was unplugged. Leona tries to pin the calls down. Anything, tower, cell path, a hint of location. The screen doesn't fail. It behaves perfectly, smooth and blank, like it's politely refusing to admit the calls exist. Then the man's voice rises into a raw, disbelieving shout. It's right above us. It's a triangle. The word triangle is all she gets before the line distorts into something thick and metallic, like a radio chewing on a magnet. In the distortion, another voice appears, not frantic, not human, not even through the speaker, more like it's being laid over the room. Leona's ears ring, her teeth ache. The air in the basement turns dense, as if the desert has pressed its face against the building. And then a single word arrives inside her mind, with no sound attached to it. Not heard, not imagined. Placed. Return. Leona's hand goes cold on the desk. She stares at the console like it might start bleeding. She tries to breathe, but the word sits in her chest like a weight that doesn't belong to her. The calls cut off together. No fade, no click, just gone. Minutes later, the first patrol unit reaches mile 277. When the officer radios in, his voice is controlled in that way that means he's forcing it. 5 vehicles, all on the shoulder and partway into the lane. Hazard lights on, engines running. Leona grips the edge of her desk. No occupants, he continues. Doors open on 2, phones on seats. One car has a kid's shoe, just one. Her stomach drops. He adds something quieter, like he doesn't want the desert to overhear him. There are marks on the road, 3 circles, burned down to the aggregate, placed like someone measured it. Leona writes it down anyway, because writing is the only thing that makes it feel real. 3 burns. Triangle. No skid marks. No signs of a struggle. No footprints leading away. Just 5 running cars and 12 missing people, as if they were removed from the scene the way a hand lifts pieces off a board. Leona realizes 211 isn't a time the way normal people mean it. It's a doorway. She tries to quit after that, tells herself it's over, tells herself she can't be the person who sits in a basement while the highway steals families. But the number follows her. On the microwave when she wakes too early, on the gas pump when she refuses to look up, on her car clock drifting to 211 as if it's being gently corrected. Then, months later, she's back on nights. Not because she wants to be, because some part of her needs to know if the desert will do it again. Needs to know if that word return was a warning or an instruction. One shift, the phone never rings at all. No incoming lines. No radio chatter. No wind noise through the vents. The basement becomes so still it feels staged. Leona sits there with her headset on, listening to nothing, and starts to understand what being watched actually means. Not a gaze, but a presence arranging the world around you. At 211, her monitors flicker just once. Not a power surge, not a glitch, a blink. And then, without sound, without language, without any place for it to travel from, a message settles into her mind with the calm certainty of something that has done this many times before. We heard you. Soon, you will hear us. Leona doesn't scream. That's the worst part. She just sits there, frozen, because she knows what comes next is not another missing car. It's not another distressed caller. It's the moment the thing on Route 54 stops using the highway as a hunting ground and starts using her. What makes Route 54 terrifying isn't the triangle, it's 211, a repeatable timestamp like something learning the same doorway. The calls carry panic, not location, as if where doesn't matter. Devices don't fail naturally, they get quietly overridden. The word return doesn't warn, it commands. Mile 277 feels less like an incident and more like a demonstration. And we heard you. Soon you will hear us isn't an ending, it's a countdown. If your phone rang at 2:11 a.m. and the voice sounded almost human, would you hang up or listen? Tell me in the comments, have you ever had a time that kept following you? What was it?